I'm Ben Shirley. I'm a senior lecturer at University of Salford, and I do a lot of work on audio-related accessibility research, as a result of which I've had the pleasure of working with some of these people. So welcome to the Accessible Immersive Experiences session. The format of this session will involve Slido and a lot of questions from you guys, I hope. I hope you have lots of questions as we go through. What I'm going to do first of all is go through the members of the panel and allow them to introduce themselves and explain what they do in immersive experiences and where they see accessibility fitting into that, in the hope that that's going to stimulate a few questions. I suspect that almost everybody in this room has a slightly different idea of what an immersive experience is. Some people may not have a thought about what an immersive experience is, so hopefully this initial round will give people a clue of the kind of things that we're talking about. So feel free to chip in on Slido as we go through, and we'll get to your questions once we've been around the panel. Okay, so first up we have, just to very briefly introduce people, we have Larry here from who is Senior Director and Head of Accessibility at Verizon. We've got Rupert Brun, who's a broadcast consultant, currently working with Fraunhofer. We've got Chris Hughes there, who works actually upstairs from me at Salford, but is currently working on the IMAC project, which is working on accessibility and immersive experiences. And on the far side there, we've got Jamie Hindhaugh, who's Chief Operating Officer of BT Sport. So without further ado, can I ask you to, Larry, if you can kick us off and tell us about what you do in immersive experiences and accessibility. And I shall hand you the clicker.
All right. Do I have slides? I guess I must.
Yes.
For those of you who can't see the screen, I'm appearing in black and white today. It's a corporate look and feel. Everyone else is in color. I'm head of accessibility for Verizon Media. It's a division of Verizon, which is mostly oriented towards our media and content. I'm sure you've heard of Yahoo, TechCrunch, HuffPost, many other brands like that. Our accessibility team is focused first and foremost on making our products fully accessible, as you've been hearing throughout the day. We do focus on that. We have a small but mighty team, 50% of which are attending this conference this week, so there is 6 of us, so it's 50%. And because we've been allowed to take on challenges around new and innovative technologies in the field, when Yahoo was bought by Verizon, one of our new sister organizations is called Riot Labs. And this organization is based in Los Angeles, and they produce 360-degree videos, augmented reality, virtual reality video. So that's one definition of what we call immersive experiences. Sometimes for shorthand, we call it XR. X stands for a variable. Put whatever you like in the X. But for us at Verizon Media, and because our accessibility group is given this free hand, we decided, because we wanted to take on this question. If we're producing content that is immersive, we should make it accessible. We happen to have a partnership, let me see if we have a slide here, with Cornell Tech, which is a university.
Is that slide number?
There we go. In New York City. And they had been receiving funds from one of our organizations, AOL, American Online, and they approached us. You see the slide here says July 2019. In January, a professor there said, we're working on this question of virtual reality and accessibility. Would you like to put together a workshop? And immediately I said yes. And from that point, we decided we were going to call together people we knew, Cornell Tech throughout the academic field, Verizon Media through the tech world. We thought the time was now. We've been involved in gaming. We know the world of gaming, in essence, is the first step into virtual reality, and gamers have been very good on making their technology accessible. But we knew, or at least we've been saying, everyone on this panel has been saying, virtual reality is the next big thing. It's been the next big thing for 2 decades, maybe more. But we're getting the sense it's going mainstream. And we realized if we waited for it to go mainstream and tried to address accessibility then, it would be way too late. So we put out a call. We put out a call to all of our connections and throughout the world of accessibility and technology. The response was enormous. I see many people who attended this XR Access Symposium in the audience today because they just thought it was the right thing to do. We had this amazing array of leaders with disabilities and users with disabilities and academics and Microsoft HoloLens and Google and Adobe and Oculus Rift and what am I missing? Magic Leap, who actually hired a full-time accessibility manager. None of the other companies have that yet, but they will. And for a full day, we just hammered it out. What are we going to do to try to address this technology? And I love when we tell people we have now an XR Access Symposium, people say, really, you're going to make virtual reality accessible to blind people? How are you going to do that? And my favorite answer is, I have no idea. But luckily, we have people who really care, and they're really dedicated to this. As I said, many in the room today, Chris from Google for one. We broke into 12 breakout groups to try to deal with issues like Haben was talking about, haptics, input, hardware. What about XR and learning? What about in the educational environment from K-12 all the way up to lifelong learning, using sound and image recognition? We talked and talked and talked all day. It was an amazing event. From that day, we then put together XR Access, a website now. We have xraccess.org, 6 working groups around those breakouts. We've got volunteers who are dedicating their time to lead these groups, really all over the world. We're joining together on a regular basis. We have an executive committee made up of people with disabilities, academics, tech sector, and we're beginning to hammer this out. This is not a short-term project. We assume this is going to take a long time. We know people want to get together again, and we are and have. From today, from next June, the folks from Immersive Accessibility have put together, we're putting together a workshop all day long in Barcelona at the IMX conference that'll be posted on this website. We're having a call for papers. We're calling for right now. If you have something you'd like to present in mid-June about XR Access, we're going to join together and then be part of the main conference at IMX. And it will keep going and going and going, another symposium, and we're really putting a call out to as many people as possible to join us. And I'm really looking forward to particularly working with the IMAC project because they're really the cutting edge so far on the tools we need and the demonstrations of it. And I don't know if I have any more. Oh, a couple of things, just how how's my time?
You're good, you've got a minute.
Good. Our company has been doing virtual storytelling. We did a story about the anniversary of the Stonewall riots in New York City, an immersive AR environment where you can actually go and feel what it was like. It's a great platform for figuring out, okay, how do we make that accessible? Right now, we're not going with head-mounted devices. We're going with your handheld mobile devices. We're also looking at, hey, we're a commercial company, ads. There's a lot of shopping online that's using AR these days. We want to make our online shopping accessible as well. We're going to use some image recognition, speech recognition, voice in, voice out, to try to make the commercial aspects of augmented and virtual reality accessible as well. Microsoft has done remarkable work with seeing VR plugins into HoloLens, where there's a full array of technologies that help enhance the experience already in virtual reality for HoloLens. And that was developed by an intern at Microsoft who then was at Cornell Tech in the PhD program. And I believe that's the last of my slides. For more and all of these slides, you can go to xraccess.org, and we're ready to work with all of you.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Larry. So we heard a little plug for the iMac project there, which is good, which we'll hear about next. But as I'm also involved with the IMX conference in June, I'll give an additional plug for that and remind people that it's actually in Barcelona as well. So it's actually quite a nice place to be in June if you do have something interesting to present or you want to know more about what's going on in that order. Okay, so over to Chris Hughes, if I can just hand you that.
Thank you very much. Well, it's very exciting to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the introduction. I think it's as Ben introduced, we both work for Salford University, and I think it says something about one of my frustrations sometimes in the academic world, that we both work in accessibility, and I was there for at least 2 years before I realised his office was only 40 steps as I counted from my own. But now we've found each other, it's quite an exciting time. I'm a lecturer at Salford University, based in computer science, so I'm a technologist. I like playing with technology and I like solving problems using technology. I'm also very fortunate that I'm heavily involved in this immersive accessibility project that was referred to before. And in that project, I get to work with a consortium of very impressive people, all the way from industry, academia, broadcasters, bringing together everything that we think we need in order to develop a kind of full solution. So I like to plug the project at every possibility, and this is one of those great possibilities to tell you a little bit about what we're doing. I'm just going to talk over this, so on our website, if you're interested in what we're doing, we've got loads of great videos that tell you all about it, but this makes quite a nice visual that sits in the background to give you some teasers a bit about what goes on. So basically, within the project, we had 30 months, and we were focused on the idea of immersive accessibility. So by immersive accessibility, I mean immersive video. So this is kind of where we're creating the illusion that the content is all around you, and that works towards the point where you feel some kind of presence because you feel like you're actually immersed within that environment. And although the broadcasters are very much interested in playing with 360-degree video and what they can do and whether that's going to be their next big thing, we did a full survey of 360-degree players that exist, and the accessibility is very limited. We found that most of them attempt to do some work with subtitles, and they kind of lift from what happens in the TV world and try and put that directly into a 360-degree space. And none of the existing platforms have really any focus on how audio description might work, how sign language might work when it comes into this environment. So the project's really been focused on developing a complete end-to-end workflow solution that basically allows us to start at the very beginning where we've got a complete suite of editing tools that effectively allows us to create sign language, audio description, subtitles within this space, within 360-degree space, all the way through to a player that we have at the end of the process. It's a European-funded project, so the player, it's completely open source, and we'll be making it available for anyone that wants to use that and all the research and everything that's happened along the way. The project's followed a complete kind of user-centric methodology. So one of the other things we found was that in the kind of immersive 360-degree world, people were making a lot of guesses about what might work in that space. And we've been very lucky within this project that we've had the space to actually talk to users, to find out what they want, focus groups that allow us to find out their initial ideas. We could then have several cycles of development where we built prototypes and took it back to them to find out what actually works for them and what doesn't. And so as well as within the project, us having developed a player and all the tools in the pipeline, we've also got a massive kind of amount of research and information that's all published that tells us about what the users want and how they feedback and how they respond to things. So you can see in the background, this is a few screenshots of one of the videos, and you can basically use the player. It's web-based, so it works very nicely on any platform. So whether that's a head-mounted display, so you're fully immersed, whether that's on your mobile phone where you can move it around and have a look and feel like you're in that environment. It works very nicely across the board, except we've built in on the top all the kind of accessibility services that you might expect. So yeah, I'm very keen to plug the player and the project at any opportunity, really. So if anyone's interested in this afterwards, do come and talk to me and I can point you at demos. And we have a great website that tells you a lot about it.
That's great, thanks, Chris. How long's the project still got to run?
So it was a 30-month project, and it's now running till around April.
Okay.
So we have been through 2 development cycles, and we're now at the point where we're about to push out a larger scale open pilot, which is quite an exciting time as well, because a couple of the broadcasters involved in the project are now embedding this onto their website and pushing it out to users in the wild, as it were.
So this is a good time for broadcasters and content creators and so on to get involved with the project and to look, because the tools are there, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much. Next, we'll go to Rupert Brun. Now, I've worked with Rupert for a number of years when he was at the BBC previously, and now when he's working as a consultant, and I've worked with his colleagues at Fraunhofer on a number of different areas around accessibility and immersive audio and so on. So if I can hand over to you, Rupert, to explain some of what you've been doing.
Yeah, I'd like to start by asking a question of those of you who watch television. How many of you have ever struggled to understand what's being said because the background music and sound effects are too loud and drown it out? Yes, lots and lots. So about a decade ago, I realised this was going to be a growing problem because of two factors. Firstly, we have an ageing population, and it's a problem that tends to increase with age. And secondly, because the ways in which we create and consume media are diversifying very rapidly. So it used to be that we all watched television on a great big box that had a screen about this big and some decent-sized loudspeakers that gave quite good sound. As technology has advanced, televisions have got thinner and thinner, to the point where apparently you can't sell them if they're thicker than about this. I don't know why, because by the time they're on a stand or the wall, they're this, but they've got to be really thin. So they have very small loudspeakers, very often pointing down or pointing backwards. And particularly with the inexpensive models, it can be quite hard to understand what's being said. And then we consume virtual reality. We consume content with earbuds from our mobile devices on the underground train, where it's very noisy. So the whole experience is diversifying very rapidly, and I realised this was going to make this problem far worse. So I started looking for people to work with, and I met up with Fraunhofer. And 6 months later, we did an experiment from the Wimbledon Tennis Championships in London, where we had a web player that allowed you to watch the matches from centre court and a single slider control that let you rebalance the sound. So if you pushed it one way, you got very clear commentary and virtually no sound from the court. And if you pushed it the other way, you got the sound of the court with all the baseline grunting as people were serving the ball, and virtually no commentary. And I learnt a few things from that. I first of all learnt that the audience, the public liked it, they understood it, and they wanted it. I also learnt that the BBC were doing a really good job of creating a sound balance that was in the middle of the range that the public wanted, but which almost nobody wanted. Because if you are focused on the game and you know your tennis, you don't want a commentator. You want the immersive experience of being on central court at Wimbledon and being in that environment and watching that match. As where, if you have a hearing impairment, or even if you don't, but you're making the dinner while you're watching this thing, actually you need the commentary to be loud and clear because you're not able to follow it otherwise. And I realised from those things I'd learned that there was potential in this. So let's fast forward 9 years later. Where have we got to? Well, Fraunhofer have turned these ideas into an open international standard called MPEG-H audio, and it's actually on the air in South Korea. So if you go there, perhaps we should all go, you can actually have on your television screen controls that will let you adjust the sound balance. How you do that is something that we need to do some more work on. I'm an audio engineer. I'm quite happy to have my television screen covered in controls and sliders and meters and play with all of that. Apparently some people don't want that. So what we offer are some simple presets where you can have the broadcast mix, or you can have one with the dialogue boosted, or you can have one with the audio description enabled. You can choose different languages. And it's not just of benefit for an accessibility use. You could, for example, if you're watching a football match and it's Liverpool versus Arsenal and you support Liverpool, you don't want to hear cheering when Arsenal score. You want to hear the boos. So you could have personalised commentary or decide which crowd you want to sit with. There are a huge number of potential uses for it in addition to the accessibility benefits. And it also does the immersive thing with sound going up and down and left and right and forwards and backwards, and we can do that with a simple sound bar underneath the television. You don't have to fill your room with loudspeakers anymore. And I think what's really good about this is that the accessibility features are part and parcel of the whole offering. There is no incremental cost to the content creators in creating those, or in the consumer products in incorporating them. If they're going to do MPEG-H audio, you get the whole lot. So there's no excuse for a poor accessibility experience. It's all there. And we have consumer products, and we have a full range of commercially available production tools to create the content, code it, distribute it. Works on television, works online. So that's what I've been doing, and I'm very much looking forward to some questions when we've got past the introduction from the other members.
Thanks very much, Rupert. I'm particularly interested by the way in which the accessibility features are just another part of the personalisation features, so it becomes a kind of standard feature set, which sounds like it's something that is a lot easier to pitch and to sell to broadcasters and so on. Okay, Jamie, over to you.
I'm the broadcaster you're pitching to. Okay, and I have worked with Rupert as well, but we've never had a conversation before this, and we're doing something quite similar actually, which should be interesting. So I'm just going to take you on a little story. For those people who don't know, BT Sport, which I joined from the BBC to help launch and set up, is a live sports, UK-only sports network, which is online and on TV. And we've been around about 7 years, so quite a competitive market. And we've built up quite a solid reputation around using innovation to take people closer to the action. So we're the first live sports broadcaster in the world for 4K, first live sports broadcaster in the world to deliver Dolby Atmos immersive sound, first live broadcaster in the world to do 12 camera 360 coverage with separate commentary, first broadcaster in the world to do high dynamic range and wider colour gamut in live sport in all of those aspects. And in 29th of July, this is not a sales pitch, by the way, it is a story to take you through where we're going, and it will make sense. But 29th of July this year, we did something which I was very proud of. We launched a new channel called BT Sport Ultima. And BT Sport Ultima is literally, the title is about giving the audience the ultimate viewing experience. And it's about building trust with audiences and not having to talk about 8K, 4K, HDR, WCG, DA, etc. And what it does is very, very clever. I think it is anyway. It's one channel that will determine what platform you're on, what connectivity you have, and what subscription you have, and it will serve a variant of that content. So if you've got a fantastic 4K TV, you'll get 4K HDR if it does HDR. If you haven't, you'll get HD HDR. If you're on your mobile, you'll get HD HDR. If you've just got an old TV, you'll get 4K SDR, 4K HDR. You sort of get the picture. It's about actually being very clever and super serving one channel to very many different people. Now the challenge with that is that's the ultimate viewing experience for about 90% of our audience. And the thing that really interests us is around the fairness agenda actually, and it's about actually, if you go to the heart of what sport is, it's a real social experience. And therefore, how do we, through BT Sport Ultima, create a more inclusive environment, which means it is truly social for everybody, regardless of challenges that they may have. And we've been doing some work with research and development and looking at what I should have mentioned is BT Sport Ultima is delivered over IP. So what this means now is as a broadcaster, you're not doing one-to-many anymore, you're doing one-to-one. And that's really, really important in this. And we've been working on a technology called object-based broadcasting. I'm not sure people will understand what that is. So I will just give you a little definition for simple people like me to help understand it. Think of a sandwich. Think of two slices of bread. They could be brown, wholemeal, or white. Think about that as your channel wrap. Think about a sandwich. You could have ham, you could have pickle, you could have cheese, you could have tomato, you could have cucumber. Depending on your tastes, you may choose a different colour wrap and you may choose different ingredients. If you think about that as a broadcast feed, are you staying with me? Where each one of those ingredients is a package, and each one of those packages is content that we create and curate. Okay? This is what object broadcasting will do, and this is where the BT Sport Ultimate experience will come from. So we are pretty far down the line here, We will be launching something next year, and this will become a feature of the ultimate viewing experience. So to explain what that will be, Rupert's touched on it. So audio. If you're hard of hearing, you may want to turn the commentator up or down. You may want to turn the background sound up or down. That will be part of our standard provision under BT Sport Ultima. And if you're a Liverpool fan, it means you can turn Michael Owen down. Colour blindness. So colour blindness is a really, really important facet, actually, and people may not realise this, but 99% of all people with colour blindness are male. Football is very, very difficult to watch, and we're a big football producer. So having an opportunity to be able to select a variant of the live game that is adapted for colourblind people means you can still all watch it in a shared experience, but you're choosing it that way. Different audio. So one of the things we are looking at to launch part of this is about blind commentary, which is different to radio commentary and it is different to TV commentary. And what we want is people to be able to at home select in a live environment, I want blind commentary rather than this. And again, you create this, everyone getting together, everyone joining in. And then the other thing, and this is a really, really simple thing, but I think is really effective for people hard of sight, it's twofold. Firstly, we're going to give people the opportunity to make the score clock bigger or smaller. So you can make it bigger. So whether you're sitting and someone with you who maybe is struggling to see that, you can create in a live environment that different experience. Graphics overlays. Sometimes either the colour of the graphics is wrong, the detail of the graphics is wrong. So let's give people the opportunity to select the different graphics that suit their needs better in a live environment. And also the last thing on this, which I think is really, really important as well, is we still have the old-fashioned broadcast one-to-many. So if we put a programme out that goes lovely on a 50, 70-inch TV screen, we do the same version on a mobile phone, which, to be honest, is awful, because even with the best eyesight in the world, you can't read some of those graphics. So what we're looking to be able to do is for you to be able to decide the device you're on, to select the graphic overlay you need, that best fits your requirements. It's a really, really exciting technology, and this isn't just Cuckoo Land. We are doing a massive event next year around this with all of the aspects I've just talked about, and we are looking for BT Sport Ultima to become the truly inclusive relationship to allow people to enjoy sport together, which I think is what my job should be.
That's fascinating. It sounds again like the kind of the accessibility elements come as part of a personalisation package as a kind of broader approach to it.
Yes.
Following up on one of the points that you're saying about colour blindness, the top question we have at the moment on Slido is there any way, which made me, is there any way of making snooker on TV more accessible to a colourblind viewer? Which immediately reminded me of that famous bit of commentary on, was it on the BBC? On the BBC? If for those with the black and white TVs, the blue ball is the one behind the green. Very helpful. From, I don't know, the change over to from black and white to colour TVs. So, Jamie, what's the solution for colour blindness for football?
I don't have on BT Sport, but yes.
I would imagine it's the same solution.
Yes, it's the same challenge, and there is software out there, and it's working out how you make that software available with the broadcast feed, which is where OBB for me comes in. It's critical, and what it actually does is change or enhance the variance so that you can see the difference between colours. And I'm quite prolific on Twitter, get quite a lot of feedback, and every now and then, and I do listen to it. So we'll do a graphics overlay, for instance, where we've done, let me get this right, blue on black.
Yeah.
Which actually, if you're colourblind, is bloody useless.
Yeah.
So there is technology there, and we're looking at this mechanism to give people that opportunity to select that, but also allow them to select it, but other people in the room can still watch the live sport at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. There's another one for you, Jamie. Sorry about this. Why have BT Ultimate on its own? Why not have it as a default for everyone? Does it cost more? That's the most popular question, which suggests that there's a lot of potential custom out there for the channel.
Well, we are a subscription. We're a pay TV service anyway, so to get BT Sport you have to pay for us. And it's about the ultimate viewing experience for me has to be everything, which it's been more of a challenge. So 4K, we did live 8K in Amsterdam. That will be coming very soon with us. And again, I'm not going to be talking about BT Sport are now doing 8K. What I want people to do is BT Sport Ultimate is the ultimate viewing experience that gives you all of these different aspects. And yes, it costs a little bit more. Over time, I believe it will become standard.
Yeah.
And it's challenging.
Yeah.
But it's also a fantastic opportunity to allow people to enjoy sport in a very different way.
No, that's great, thank you. There's a couple of questions around VR and AR. So one around what research has been done to date to understand what the barriers are with using VR and AR. And obviously for visual impairment, there's clear barriers there. And another related one around, which has fallen off the screen somewhere, around somebody not having come across useful solutions for VR and AR and accessibility. And Larry, would that be something that you've looked at in the XR forum?
Yeah, absolutely. The initial questions are, how do we map what we have for solutions in linear flat media to this immersive environment? So, for instance, we think about closed captioning or subtitling. Really great work done by both the BBC and IMAC. This really interesting question of, in an immersive environment, where do you put the captions? Yeah. It's bottom center as a default, but if I'm sitting here and Ben's talking to someone else and I'm kind of listening in on his conversation, should I have his captions over here? Should I turn this way and his captions get larger? BBC did some very interesting research, which basically concluded we need more research.
All good research does that.
Yeah. But the issue really is, how do we take what we've got today and go far beyond that? Solutions are being in the midst of development. The iMac editing tools got some really interesting ways of indicating where captions are coming from using color, arrows, compass. Same thing for description in a immersive environment for a blind person. Audio description exists on a lot of media today, but if you're in a surround environment, if you're blind, how do you even know there's anything interesting to see? Should we use beacons, gestures, haptics? The iMac editing tool enables you to go to a place in time and space and attach a description. So as you turn your head around, as you're looking around a virtual environment, you can hear a beacon or a sound or all different ways of indicating there's something to be described for you. We even consider it something called directed description, where you can use haptics or any number of ways of signaling to people there's something out there for you to absorb. It's all in development now. I wouldn't say there's anything available commercially in the field yet, but that's absolutely what our XR Access initiative is studying, as others are too.
So it's kind of ongoing work at the moment.
Absolutely.
No, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a fascinating world. I mean, I love the immersion of 360 video, but one of the real beauties of it for me is the fact that, okay, so the action's happening there, but most of the time I'm kind of interested in what's happening behind. And that becomes really difficult then if you have a disability and you can't follow the audio cues, for example, that tell you that the action's behind you. And so, as Larry said, a lot of what we've done in terms of the iMac player, we've looked at different ways of indicating where the person speaking is. So we don't at any point want to force you to follow the main action, because as I say, sometimes if you're watching the opera, it's actually more interesting to see what the conductor's doing or what's happening behind you in a field somewhere. And so we've trialed various different approaches, such as using arrows that give you an indicator that the action's behind you, or we've got a radar display that you can use. It's kind of all about customization and choice, what you find the best approach to use. I think it's also important to remember in terms of immersive content, it's a combination of things. It's not just video, it's not just audio. And in terms of 360-degree video, we have fantastic kind of ambisonic sound now. You can actually create sound that feels like it's behind you. And you can create the cues that say the person speaking, you can hear them behind you. Or, as I say, you've got the video and you can create the cues in there as well. So I think it's an important point that all these things are there, and if some of those cues don't work for you, that's at the point where we need extra information.
And I guess all those additional sources of information for various different specific needs would apply equally to gaming as to VR and AR.
The gamers have done great work. Caption games have been around for years. Insets where you can focus in on one particular area. So we're learning a lot from that community, which there's a foundation called Able Gamers that really have delved into that, mostly around mobility impairments, but they're looking at sensory as well.
Yeah.
So I think we're learning from the gamers, but the gamers have their own world, and we're looking to expand to everyone who might benefit.
Yeah.
And I think building on that, one of the opportunities when we get immersive audio that can move around the room when you're consuming media comes with audio description, because it's possible to for the user to decide where in the room the audio description voice should come from. And if you move it away from the screen to be a voice near the shoulder of the person who wants the audio description, there are two benefits to that. The first is that it doesn't have to be as loud in order to be understandable, because it's separated in space from all the other sounds. And the other advantage is that it's less distracting for other people who are watching the content with you who don't need it. And so all of these things are now technically possible. What we've got to do is persuade broadcasters in Europe to start using them and find out how they work for you, which we can't do until you've experienced it.
Yeah.
I think there's some really interesting mainstream application right now, and that's the Bose sunglasses. They are doing some really interesting immersive work in audio. $200, and you get spatial audio in various environments. It really points to where we can go with audio-only immersion. Really interesting. I don't know if Bose even realized what they were creating that might help people with disabilities, but we give them a pat on the back anyway.
Yeah, there's some really interesting possibilities around that, particularly as aids to visually impaired people. Carrying on the kind of audio theme here, I think, so one of the questions that's come in, how do you see immersive audio experiences driving innovative talk formats such as podcasts in the future, which I'm guessing Rupert may have thoughts on?
Well, that's a really good question, because I hadn't thought about immersive podcasts.
No.
Radio dramas.
Yeah, certainly radio drama is an area. So if we move away from the traditional podcast content of a couple of people sitting and chatting about something and think about it as delivering spoken word over the internet so that it can be personalized, then certainly radio drama is a clear area where you could make it more accessible for people. And drama in general, there's a lot of work being done by Ben and his colleagues in Salford around making drama easier to understand, because in a drama it's not just the dialogue that you need to hear in order to understand what's going on. It might be that some of the other sounds, like a gunshot or a car pulling up or a door slamming, are also important to understanding the story. And they've been doing some really good work on the narrative importance of these different sound elements, which could be delivered over an IP platform as a podcast, for example, so that you can have one simple control that lets you decide how important you want the speech and the sounds that are important to the narrative to be, how loud and clear they should be, compared with all the rest, which is just painting the scene for you. And one simple control can change the prominence of those things in quite a sophisticated way, so that you have a nice, easy user interface and get a really good experience, and you don't just get the sound boosted, you hear the sounds that are important to the story. And I think if we can get that incorporated into podcasting platforms, we're onto a winner.
Thanks very much. I'm not allowed to plug things being the chair, but I'm grateful that you're plugging my stuff for me, Rupert. It's very, very kind.
You can pay me later.
In terms of all the personalisation potentials of I guess we're talking about object-based media rather than just immersive media, or in a lot of cases that's the same thing. Is there any downside to these the potential for personalisation? Can you have too much?
It can certainly be presented in ways which are too complex for people, and that's a hurdle we need to overcome, working with the manufacturers of consumer equipment. Another challenge I have met from the industry is that the sound balancers will spend hours, days, even weeks finally crafting their sound balance. And then you say to them, oh, by the way, the public are going to be able to mess with this and change it all around. Yeah. Some of them really react very, very badly to that idea and don't want you to be able to alter their finely crafted sound balance. But I find that most people, once I talk to them about it, they realise that actually this is really liberating. Because if you're going to create content that people listening on televisions with small speakers and who have a hearing impairment are able to engage with, the dialogue needs to be quite a lot louder than it needs to be for people who have normal hearing and a really good home cinema system. And so one sound balance is not going to work for everybody. And if they try to do that and just create the one perfect balance, it will be perfect for them in the room they created it and no good for anybody else. And I think that the industry are starting to realise that actually allowing people to tweak with their finely crafted sound balance within certain defined parameters actually is very liberating and is a real creative tool, and it's not something which is going to degrade their original artistic intent. It's going to make that original artistic intent available to a wider range of people on a wider range of devices. But it takes a little while for seasoned sound professionals to make that mental journey.
I would just want to emphasize one thing you said, and that is the user interface, the simplicity. Some of the worst UIs have been developed by, I'm sorry to say, TV manufacturers and cable set-top box manufacturers. And for people to really be able to take advantage of this, it's not a downside, it's really a challenge. Make it really easy for people to make their audio best for them, make their personalization really work for them. And that's a challenge.
It is.
Can I come back, Ben, on, you mentioned challenges, and there's two, and a bit of it's Rupert's point. One of the challenges we have is we are Ofcom compliant. So we have very experienced sound mixers. I think a really good example is Celtic Rangers, sectarian chanting. So what we actually do is we mix the sound to make sure that that doesn't come through, because on our Ofcom license, we could be at risk of breach or a complaint. And the challenge that we are looking at the moment is by allowing people to turn down the commentary or turn up the background noise, and we are talking to Ofcom about it, making them aware of this technology that's coming. It opens up those challenges, which I think is an interesting one, and it's also an opportunity to look at what we do. The second thing that is important to flag is the more packages I create to give more choice, the more intensive it is. So at the moment, I will be doing a live feed with a single graphics overlay, which is meant to be in that middle ground. In the new world, I will probably be having to create 4, 5, 6 different graphic overlays that actually go along with that feed, that people can select the ones they want. So there is more work required for the right reasons on the ground, but we do need to think about some of our obligations around Ofcom, because you start asking the question, which feed were you watching? And can you track that, and can you make sure, flashing imagery, all of these sorts of things do need to be thought about in the rounds of offering choice.
It's an interesting point about the old firm games, and the kind of, there are elements of that sound scene that you wouldn't want people to be able to accidentally push up for all that matter. And one of the questions that popped up here along your what somebody said about being able to, I think Rupert, about not wanting to hear when the Chelsea fans cheer when there's a goal scored. And someone saying, is there a risk that creates something of an echo chamber? And I do wonder if there's a link between that question and what you're saying there, in terms of if you could choose an area of that ground, there's potential risks around it, I guess. You have to be quite careful how that personalisation was presented.
Yeah, and we have looked at, as part of the OBB rollout, about giving people different commentary depending on the teams they support. And we talked a bit earlier about the risk around OBBs. For me, it's a bit like doing an election special where you've got screens flying in everywhere and curating. And at the heart of what we're trying to do is enable people to understand and enjoy the sport the best they can. And therefore, I think the focus shouldn't be on clever gimmicks. It should be on enabling more people to sit together to watch the sport. And I think that's where the opportunity is. The challenge is people trying to do really clever gimmicky stuff that actually looks good for about 2 minutes, but then people don't use.
It seems that the technologies that are facilitating the immersive experience are also potentially facilitating new ways of providing access services and new ways for people to be able to better experience these immersive experiences. Just as a brief finishing thing, I wonder if each of you could just say, what does the future look like in terms of accessible immersive experiences, and what's the timeline? Go on, Larry, I'll put you on the spot first.
I like the idea that we've been talking about, and that's personalization. And as technologies in a non-invasive way begin to learn how we use them, they should shape to our needs. So if, for instance, you're constantly riding the audio up and down because it's not working for you, if you're hard of hearing, it'd be nice if it just simply adjusted and say, oh, this person really needs boost in the mid-range, and let's just set it that way. And maybe recognizing that my wife came in the room and she's got perfect hearing, so she doesn't need that. And this immersive and flexible interfaces that do personalization, learn from you, would be pretty great. Timeline, the easy stuff I think we'll be doing within the next year. Captioning, description, taking what we know in linear flat media and applying it, but we want to go so far beyond that. And that, I see 2-3 years. We want to apply image recognition, speech recognition to all these platforms, speech in, speech out. And I think it's not that far in the future. I mean, within the next 5, I think we'll have very good, accessible, immersive experiences.
Rupert?
I see a future where the content creator creates one thing which contains all the different elements and the information needed to ensure that you get the best possible experience, whatever device you decide to consume it on, whatever environment you're in, and whatever your needs may be, without you having to even think about it. It'll just happen and you will get the best possible experience. Timeline, I don't see it happening on broadcast television, you know, over the air stuff anytime soon because there isn't the bandwidth. But I think some of the European broadcasters will start delivering it over their online IP-based services within the next year. I think we'll start to see some stuff actually happen. Be experimental and only occasional at first. It'll take a while to become the norm, but we will see something, I'm pretty confident, within the next year.
How soon before the iMac outputs are implemented then, Chris?
Well, yeah, the future, it's an interesting question. iMac-wise, I mean, we're in a fantastic place where we've got to the end of several cycles and we've got an open pilot about to start. So actually, our player's going to become available very soon. The future is an interesting direction. I mean, I agree with everything that's kind of been said from the perspective that we should be developing one product. At the moment, we're developing a movie and then the accessible version or the accessibility services on the side. In terms of the future, I really do see this inclusive scenario where it's one product and then it's down to customization. You just turn on what you want or you render it in whatever way you want to work for you. And I think that will be a much more exciting place. But in terms of timeframes for that happening, as established in conversations earlier, I can never work out timeframes. I build a prototype in the lab and I expect someone to be using it the next day. That's as unrealistic as I ever get in terms of timeframes. But I think we're going to see a trend. We're going to see things starting to improve now, and I think it's going to continue for many years to come.
Jamie, what does the future look like and what's the timeline?
And excuse the pun, but I think it's going to be the ultimate personal experience, the ultimate shared experience, and I'm going to be bold, 2020. There you go.
Very nice. Next year. We've got a launch date, or a launch year.
Yeah. Throw a few months out,
IBC,
I'll let you know which.
We'll wait and see at IBC. Okay, thanks very much to the panellists. For me, it's been a really interesting conversation around not just accessibility, but how that's embedded in personalisation as a whole, which sounds like a great sell into the broadcasters and so on to make sure that material becomes accessible. So if you could give them a traditional round of applause for input there.